Okay. Well, what we're going to do today, and if you wouldn't mind muting, everybody can mute, and then we'll get started. What we're going to do here is I'm going to introduce a topic, and I have a little bit of a couple of slides that I prepared, and we're going to launch into a discussion. So I'm really hoping this is a discussion that I'll lead. And the discussion is going to be very important because I think this is where our role as building forth really comes forth. That is building forth density, building forth the fourth chakra inside ourselves, and building forth on our spiritual journey, FORTH, building forth. And if we can learn to weather the deconstruction or the disorder of our lives, especially as they pertain to any worldviews or belief systems, and then learn to navigate that liminal space into reorder or reconstruction, when we can do that with some level of equanimity and humility, then we give that gift to others. Because it is true that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, but it is also equally true that when the teacher is ready, the student appears. And right now, this world needs guides, humble, authentic guides that can help Earth humanity make this transition from disorder to reorder. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to open it up and just give a little bit of a presentation, and then that'll launch us into a conversation. All right. So let's get started with the slideshow. Play from the start, and here we go. So this is something that I put together a long time ago. It's actually from a painting that's in my office. And I'd asked the painter to create, using his imagination, to create what I often teach. And these are things that I got from Richard Rohr and other teachers of mine. This idea of a journey from the old room to the new room and passing through liminal space. And this is really what construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction truly is all about. Whether it's inside of us or whether it is outside of us, or even our worldviews. And so I wanted to kind of get us familiar with this particular pattern of the old room, the liminal space, and the new room. And the next slide is a lot of symbols. Now, I remember talking to Richard Rohr recently, and I gave him a bunch of a few slides that had just images on it, and he just started laughing, and he says, well, Catholics are just so archetypal. They're just all images. And of course, he's one too, and he was laughing because that's exactly what I do as well. But I'd like to just describe what I've learned through being a counselor since 2001, also in my personal life, and then teachers and spiritual teachers that I really admire. They seem to be talking in the ways that I'm going to be talking right now, and see if it works for you. And then we're going to then we'll open up discussion about maybe using some of these terms and ideas and archetypes to describe this journey from deconstruction to reconstruction. So if you could look here at the blue area, this was the old room of our lives, or the status quo. We're going to use it right now as the negotiation place between two opposites. Okay, the two opposites. The first of the two opposites is the one, and that is represented metaphysically as the red ray, or the base or root chakra. It is the one energy, one incarnation, you as me. And then the other side of that, the opposite of that, is the many, the one and the many. You and I are born into the coincidence of opposites that is often referred to in spiritual literature, the coincidence of opposites. And that is the orange ray, which is the orange chakra, and it's, according to the raw material, it is the energy center of personal identity, who we think we are. But the orange ray, or our second chakra, personal identity, is something that we are constantly negotiating between those two opposites. And that is the one, me, and you. You are you, I am me, we're one. You're one person. And then the many. When you're born, you're automatically one person born into your family, born into your extended family, your culture, community, religious community, all of these things. And what keeps us from going insane, I think, early on, is the development, the important development of order or of a construct. You can think of it as the construction of our house that we're going to live in, or the construction of our way that where we can feel secure. And so, for example, if you can think to, when we go to a new place where there's lots of people, for example, like I was just at Theology Beer Camp and I didn't know anybody there. Maybe I knew one or two, but that was it. So I was very aware again of I am one person amongst many. And there's always this question of, well, who am I in this? Who am I in that situation, in this new situation? And that is something that if you learn how to find yourself quickly, then you construct an identity. Now, how this relates to construction of maybe inheriting a religious worldview or religious tradition or some kind of other, worldview, that our culture that we think is true, because when we're young, whatever we're told, usually we're going to believe for a while. And we need that. As many spiritual teachers would say, it's okay to start out conservative. You need to have a sense of belonging to a community and feel chosen in that. So the story here is just like it is true for one person, that you are negotiating between the one and the many, and that sense of that orange ray coming out as that dance. Who am I? Constantly asking, who am I in this? Well, that is true at a larger scale with these religious traditions. You're born into it, and it's kind of like there's one truth, and then but out there's many people telling you what is true. So the one in the many, there's many churches or there's many religions saying, we're the one, we're the right one, we're the right one. And a religion would be an attempt at a macro level to provide that orange ray identity that we are this. You see, we are constructing an identity, and inside, and it's supposed to be strong enough to weather the tension between the one and the many. The one truth, the many attempts at saying that they have the truth, and then that thing in the middle is our way, our culture, our religion that says this is how we know to follow that truth. And so many people will stay inside of that construct, that order, that, if you will, negotiation writ large between order, the one and the many, the chaos of the many. And they'll stay in that until we have a shock. Here's the shock, the shock of something. So what's important here is, well, how I'm not saying it's important, but how I've described the construct is, if if you can picture this rectangle, inside of the rectangle, you have construct and order. When we have a shock, it's as if a triangle, which is it's almost like a knife. You can think of a knife that just comes in and just arises and pierces that rectangle and splits it apart. That shock starts to split apart our construct, our order. And all of a sudden, what made sense in the old room, what made sense in the construct and the order, doesn't make sense anymore. We can't unknow what we know. And this is deconstruction or disorder. Now, it is immensely painful. People go through existential anxiety and depression, and often it leads to giving it all up, nihilism. We either choose to commit, often some people will commit actual suicide, or they will commit kind of a suicide of the soul, if you will, giving it all up, like I don't care and I don't even know and I don't, and it's sort of choosing some form of the black pill instead of the blue pill or the red pill. It's the black pill of nihilism. And it's also important to know that the purpose of deconstruction and disorder is to let the cracks happen. And as Leonard Cohen said, cracks are how the light gets in. See? So the shock deconstructs our order. We're thrust into liminal space and it's all cracked up. All right. Now, here is where we have to do it ourselves, and then we can help others perhaps weather the storm as well into reconstruction. And how this works, I think, is if I'm borrowing again from spiritual traditions and good psychology, as well as the law of one, we move into the new room of our life, or reconstruction and reorder. We'll move into that through basically one thing. In fact, you might say the key to moving from the deconstruction to the reconstruction, the key to opening that door, is to die. Yeah. And so here we can start to see the Christian mythos of the death and resurrection, how the cross saved. The cross saves us. Saves us from what? The cross, if we can bear the tension of the cross, or you can even think of the cross as the coincidence of opposites, the tension. If you can bear that tension strong enough, well enough, and with as much dignity, and learn to say, in a sense, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Forgive me, for I know not what I do. I don't even know what I don't know. There's a way that we have to die to our need to reorder the disorder too quickly. It's kind of like if I want to bake a cake, I can't turn the heat up to 500 degrees and get it done quickly, and instead of following the recipe, which might be 325 for a certain amount of time. It won't work, because if we try to force a reordering of the disorder or the deconstruction because we're uncomfortable, if we try to force that, then we end up creating a new version of the order box. We create a new version of the old room. Maybe we just add a second floor to an old house. So what we have to do is I try to think of the pathway between disorder and reorder, or deconstruction and reconstruction. I try to think that in between there's a semi-permeable membrane. And we'll talk more specifically where this might be located on the body at the next slide. But the semi-permeable membrane is there, and the only way through the semi-permeable membrane is forgiveness, love, and standing under, or understanding, of course, but I'm really trying to emphasize standing under ourselves, seeing how we arrived at a certain state in our life, seeing how others might be clinging to the construction order box, because of fear, even if they never thought that they're in fear. They're in fear. For example, I'm noticing most of the Trump signs are down in my neighborhood now, but almost all of the Trump signs that were in and around my neighborhood, there was lots of different Trump signs, but the most common one was no fear. Trump, no fear. Like the words no fear. Okay. Well, that's a dead giveaway for that kind of need to say no fear. It's a dead giveaway of there's lots of fear. And we need to have a figure that we project our power upon who will guarantee us order and construct in the midst of disorder. So forgiveness is not necessarily saying, oh, everything is okay. It's really about F-O-R comes from beforehand. So think of it as I forego or foreknowledge. It's beforehand. And then forgive. The give part is I'm giving something. What am I giving? I'm giving the other person, and I'm giving myself the dignity of being on the path of evolution. I'm giving them the dignity of development, because we are all the one infinite creator slowly evolving into the capacity to recognize that we are the one infinite creator in all the ways, not just concepts, but in other ways too. And so we're giving each other the dignity of that development. Yeah. That allows us to move in some semblance of reconstruction and reorder. And it will be some kind of version of the order box in some ways, but whatever is interpreted is going to be interpreted from a very different place. And it would be usually seen from the perspective of the order box or the construct box. It would be seen as almost heretical. I'll give you an example of that. So I can safely say in my own life that I affirm the doctrine of, let's say, the body of Christ. But how I understand that is completely different than the order box or the construct box, because a lot of Christians, for example, and how I was taught is, unless you are, baptized in this particular way and you are saying yes to this particular denomination, unless you're doing that, you're not a part of the body of Christ. But my own deconstruction and disorder, and I hope emerging into the reconstruction of my life, is certainly following Whitehead, but also following the raw material that every entity, be it a proton or a universe, is a part of this large one body, the great body of the one infinite creator. You see, so that I can affirm, if I'm using Christ as a code name for wholeness made manifest, then I can affirm the doctrine of the body of Christ, that we're making up the body of Christ. But I understand it in a way that would be seen as heretical for a lot of Christian denominations. And the last thing I want to say about this slide is, notice that the tension at the very beginning, the tension of the construct order, if you remember, between the one and the many. Well, now we have a tension in the reconstruction area between the heart, the green ray, and the blue ray, love and wisdom, or wisdom. And what I mean by that is when a person is really landing inside, when you can say, I've gotten the graduate degree here of the reconstruction, like this is a permanent, more stable consciousness when you're inside the reconstruction of our lives, well, then it's not just the heart. It's not just a capacity to see and understand all the ways in which order belongs and disorder belongs, and now I'm in reorder. It's not just a capacity of seeing, but it's a necessary invitation. In fact, you might even call it a responsibility, or Ra calls it the law of responsibility, an honor duty, to incarnate through our actions, some level of planting seeds based upon what we know of love. So if we have a sense of that love, that understanding, that capacity for receiving through compassion what somebody else might be going through and what we're going through, we have that understanding has to be incarnated, and that would be communicating. And I don't mean communicating even just through talking. It's communicating through actions. Our embodiment needs to communicate this wisdom, this blue ray. And when we can do that with a freedom that you can be called a heretic, you can be called an outsider, you can be called, well, now I'm scared you're going to hell and all that. And you can do so without having to react, but a gentle response that's assertive in your own sense of belonging. When we can do that, then that is a good telltale sign that we have emerged in the reconstruction, reorder, and made a house there. So the last thing I want to say is you can see actually how it might even work inside of the chakra system. So here I have the diagram of the order, disorder, and reorder, or the old room, liminal space, and new room. And I have that superimposed upon somebody sitting here with the 7 chakras. And if you can see where that semi-permeable membrane is, it's located right above the solar plexus or third chakra and right below the heart. So for example, when we talk about deconstructing our deconstruction of our churches or whatever religion that we might have had, it is also true that we are always in the process, if we're paying attention, we're in the process of deconstructing our ways to be right in the world, or our ways to know that we are deconstructing our ways to be in the world in new ways. So here's an example. Let's say I learned early on in my life that I had to be very strong and I couldn't really trust anybody. And I had to learn how to problem solve really early and make order out of chaos very quickly. I have a lot of clients like this. They learned it early on because they grew up in pretty chaotic places, with people that were hurting a lot. So they develop, let's say I develop a capacity. My identity is to be powerful. My identity is to match power with power and problem solve quickly, take control quickly before anybody else does, because I'm not going to trust anybody else. And I can learn to be very angry at people from a place of trying to survive. And that anger facilitates and is the energy of my desire to protect myself or my loved ones. Well, as I continue to grow, the green ray center is always beckoning the energy to come through and up. It longs to meet the energy that's being drawn up. But normally, if I'm maintaining that bellicosity, it's going to hit that membrane and then go right back down, and that's going to create this closed loop that just festers, just gets hotter and hotter, Yet I'm restless, and the heart wants what the heart wants. And so I have to learn that the only way I can allow this energy to come into my heart, again, is to die, the need to be correct, and preference some level of connection, some level of seeing the other or seeing myself as cells in the same body, even if I have to set boundaries. You see, but that's that way, that forgiveness and seeing is how I can go through and into the heart. So I move from the old room construct, my identity is firm, and then all of a sudden something happens in my life. I desire something better for myself. I want peace. I want some sense of equanimity. That's when we have to die. and that breaks us open into the beginning of the reconstruction. Right. So anyways, that's the presentation here, and I'm interested in hearing how you guys might be thinking about it, or what would you like to share or push back? Yeah.
Well, I could say a lot of things. I think this has been my path for the last 4 or 5 years. And I think just the interesting tweak to that I'm still trying to uncover a little bit is I think, as you go through that liminal space, I think instead of having one permeable line and moving into a new room, I think I could be wrong, but I think sometimes it's not just one liminal space and now you arrived. I think you could probably draw like maybe 4 or 5 lines and 4 or 5 new rooms maybe. And each one is progress sometimes. I think sometimes you could also think you're in the new room. And like you said, Doug, all you did was redecorate and it's really the old room. It just looks different. But I think that's where some people, I think even with like the raw material, and there's some people out there who have this enlightenment, but then they kind of go back to the orange chakra or the yellow where it's fear and anyway, they don't quite move. But I think even if you are moving forward, I think I've noticed that, as I worked through liminal space a couple years ago, I was like, okay, I'm moving through liminal space. I've deconstructed kind of my religious thoughts, my heaven and hell, is Christianity the only way, reincarnate, all these kind of things. But I think it's also a psychological evolution too. So I realized, okay, I thought I'd made it through kind of like I'm doing reconstruction. I'm there. And it's like, well, okay, maybe there's still some more liminal space. Maybe there's a patch of a new room and then some more liminal space to go through that kind of works you through all the way. So anyway, there's more I could say about I'll hang up and listen. You're on mute there, Doug, if you're trying to say something.
Read your poem to everybody.
Yeah, I was going to ask Ashton weighed in here with a poem. Would you mind reading it with your beautiful voice?
Nothing like a redneck reading Teilhard. That's what we all need. So, yeah, this is just I feel like I share this often, and the reason I was able to access it so fast is I shared it with a friend today. But I think, Matt, this speaks to kind of what you were talking about. Just to echo, I think we all have various areas of our lives that are in liminal space. And we've got areas where we're in a room we've been in for a long time, but we're also in some areas of our lives where we're in the new room. We're in that place of liberation. We're in that place of freedom and peace. And it's this pattern of everything, right? I think, Matt, just to carry on what you're talking about, it's just going to keep repeating itself. That new room is actually going to become an old room again at some point. And when the knife hits, great love and great suffering gets us over into the next room, like it or not. So anyway, yeah, this is from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. A lot of you guys probably have read some of his stuff, The Divine Milieu. I forget what else he wrote, but he's a lot. Catholic priest from many, many years ago. Above all, trust in the slow work of God. We're quite naturally impatient in everything to reach the end without delay. We should like to skip the intermediate stages. We're impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new. And yet it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stages of instability, disorder, and that it may take a very long time. And so I think it is with you. Your ideas mature gradually. Let them grow. Let them shape themselves without undue haste. Don't try to force them on as though you could be today what time, that is to say, grace and circumstances acting on your own goodwill, will make of you tomorrow. Only God could say what this new spirit gradually forming within you will be. Give our Lord the benefit of believing that his hand is leading you, and accept the anxiety of feeling yourself in suspense and incomplete. So I think we need refreshing words in liminal space. We need elders like Teilhard to say, "Hey, you're in on the joke. If you're in the liminal space, you're in the good stuff. Keep going." So I share that as a gift, and while it's hard to, in all of our various liminal spaces in life, be comfortable there, I do think we can be, what's the word I want to use, nurtured there, welcomed there with other people that are on the journey. Even just language of saying, "Oh, that's right, it's supposed to be a little bumpy here. This is just part of it." I think just that was so helpful for me in my journey years ago, was just some language on this path, right? So I think, Doug, great words as always. The weird thing that stuck out to me on that image, I haven't seen that image before, was it looked like about 60% of it was disorder. It looked like about 25% is in rooms where we're comfortable, 25% are in the new ahas, the new state of being, new eyes, and then 60% was, what on earth is going on here? So
That's where the fun is.
yeah. So sorry I was long.
No, beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah. I love what you're saying. Would anybody care to share what you've heard so far, how it's been resonating, and or also maybe a quick story about your own deconstruction journey? Like maybe where did you come from and where you're hoping to go, just so that we can maybe see ourselves in somebody's journey.
Yeah, I guess I'll share.
Well, thank you, Chris.
So, yeah, your illustration. So, and just, so everyone kind of knows, I mean, like, and Doug knows, like, I'm kind of like, we've talked a bit about the raw material and the law of one. And I see a lot of like overlap with at least some of what Doug's told me, and kind of like my own kind of place where I'm at in my, trying to like construct a worldview or understanding of reality, or however you want to say it. But yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of like skeptical about especially like the origins of it and things like that, but the actual content is intriguing. And like I said, does overlap a lot with what I've been thinking in the past few years. And I'm kind of like on my third deconstruction. I grew up in the Assemblies of God church. So it's like the largest Pentecostal church in the world. And actually, the church I grew up in was the home church of Jim Bakker. So, just fun fact: my dad actually knew Jim Bakker growing up, and yeah, so that was kind of where I grew up in that church. And then I also attended a Baptist school and graduated from there. I was kind of like typical kind of like on fire for Jesus, going to youth group, multiple times a week, playing in praise bands and all that. So, and my first deconstruction was kind of more just around like, kind of like politics and kind of breaking away from that kind of like conservative right-wing thought. And then also kind of realizing that like, Jesus kind of hung out with prostitutes and tax collectors and was, kind of mixing it up with those, people, and just kind of becoming more aware of, I don't know, just kind of the bubble I was raised in. And then my second deconstruction kind of led to a period where I was just kind of like a Christian agnostic. So I would say that like, you can't really know that there's, any God or any sort of, anything like that. So, but, things about Christianity make sense to me, and I can see how, you can live a fulfilling life. And yeah, actually, if everyone followed Jesus's teachings, the world would be a better place. And so it was true in that sense, at least. Right. But, I couldn't, you couldn't know for sure, about anything. And I mean, of course, to a certain degree, that's still, that's true. But my latest kind of deconstruction and reconstruction has been more around non-duality. So I was kind of raised, being very skeptical towards anything of like Eastern religions or what was the new age that was kind of like a boogeyman, growing up. So, but there's just been between just me kind of like pondering things, and then also I I'm a therapist and as well, and I've been really intrigued by the kind of psychedelic renaissance that's been going on, the studies at John Hopkins and psilocybin. So I've obtained some mushrooms, and I did some trips of my own, and I've kind of become a little bit of a psychonaut. And I mean, that was just like, experiences that like, once you experience it, you can't unexperience it, right? And it was like, it really, I mean, I experienced ego dissolution and just this sense of like everything is one thing. And it's all kind of cyclical and moving towards something. But, yeah, it just completely, like I said, it was something that you can't unsee once you see it. And so on the one hand, like, oh, and then also like starting to learn about like, I don't know if anyone on here is familiar with the philosopher Bernardo Castro, but he's pioneering something he calls analytic idealism. And then I've learned a lot about panpsychism and just kind of these more consciousness-based ontologies. So that coupled with, the psychedelic experiences have really kind of just, I've gone in a completely, different direction in thinking about this stuff. And so anyway, but like I said, like one of the insights I've gotten is, that there's a cyclicalness to everything. And that, going through these deconstructions and reconstruction, I mean, I'm to the point where I'm like, like if you're growing, you're always going through a deconstruction and reconstruction process. And sometimes you're doing multiple at the same time, And, for a while, I attended for a long, long time Marcel Bible Church in Grand Rapids, which was founded by Rob Bell, if anyone's familiar with who he is. And I went there for about 22 years. But shoot, what was I saying? Oh, man, I just blanked out. So I'm a deconstruction. Oh, yeah. So anyway, when I was attending there, I started a group called Peace and Tension. And it was just like a group that I was trying to start for people who were kind of like in that deconstruction phase. And like this was kind of before the whole deconstruction thing became really, it kind of blew up. But I was sensing that there was kind of probably a need, people were questioning more and more. So I started this group called Peace and Tension. And the idea was that, you either, being okay with either, being in that kind of tension of kind of deconstruction and kind of like just not knowing, or being able to find peace. And something I was thinking about as I was watching Doug's presentation was, it's not really like an either or. I think that the real goal is to be able to be at peace in the tension, like you're never going to get there, right? Like if reality is infinite, you're never gonna like you're gonna always be entering new rooms, right? Like, and you can continue to kind of build as far as your understanding of reality and whatnot, but you're never gonna arrive at the end of the journey. There's always gonna be more to discover and to kind of to be, there's always gonna be those aha moments in the future. So and the goal is, like I said, to kind of come to the point where like you're fine with that. You're fine with that. There's always going to be something else, and you're always going to kind of be in a state of like becoming, which is kind of a Whiteheadian thing, I think. But to just be like, just to be cool with that, And I think that's a huge challenge for people because people always want to, get to that destination. It's like, you're not going to arrive there.
Yeah, Chris, I'm hearing you say that we can learn to be one foot on the crucifixion and one foot in the resurrection at the same time.
Yeah.
Rudy, I'm curious, how is this landing with you at all? Oh, I know you can hate me for picking on you, but you're always so wise. And I'm just wondering, would you like to weigh in? It's okay if you don't.
I would love to weigh in. I'm laughing because I was just about to be in a plate of food in a way that would have rendered me indisposed because I was eating rice. I'm very glad that you called when you did. See that? psychic
You're
gifting.
deconstructing your pattern of eating.
I think that I felt a lot of resonance in listening. My path, my journey, my story, my life is very, 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 very different. But like multiple phases of deconstruction, it was really comforting and very affirming to hear that going through multiple phases is something that happens, that is out there. I knew, I was aware, but hearing it up close is great. And shout out to the psychonauts. I see you. And the thing that's come up for me in this session the most is when you were talking about the bellicosity inherent in a fucked up childhood. I was like, bro, you're calling out everybody's fucking bingo cards tonight, dude. And I think that that's so important. And that's one of the growing edges of my walk right now, is having a conversation with all of that heat as it disperses itself. And it's not responding to, any like aphorisms or Hallmark card bullshit that I might give it. It needs like something really to work with and something really to do. So I'm trying to meet it there. And I appreciate the material and the raw material and the group for keeping me company as I engage in that madness.
We're all in it together. Thank you.
And Rudy's our local expert on trusting in the slow work of God, aren't you, Rudy?
Sure. I just got trolled. I love it.
Trolled by Troy.
I'm a very impatient human being. That's what he's referring to.
Thank you, Rudy. Thank you, Chris, so much for sharing. Anybody else would like to weigh in? We have about 5 more minutes. I'd love to hear if there was somebody else that was touched or has a quick story.
Doug, I was kind of struck with the one and the many in the beginning in the old room. And then, in that green and Blu-ray place of tension, the one and the many have so come back into play for me with the oneness being, that disarming realization that I'm a divine being having a human experience, and which would have been total heresy to me before some major, oh gosh, total falling apart with some major panic attacks and different things in my life, with the second of which was like a crucifixion and finally letting go and dying. I thought I was going to die, and I was buoyed up by such an amazing benevolence with the universe that God was much more of a theory, but just a fuller revelation, because I don't know how to explain it. But that's the tension I think of living in now, is the oneness of we're all divine beings expressing as the many all these varied, unique expressions of divinity, and being in that relationship, which is really a return to that unity that we began in, I don't know, wherever Chardin would put that as far back, but anyway, that really struck me, that it's another one in many tension going on, at least for me right now with that.
Thank you, my brother. Yeah, it repeats even in unitive consciousness. We go through the one and the many negotiation. Yes, beautiful. Thank you. DeMarcus, did you have any thoughts, or is this resonating at all, or what are some?
Yeah, it did. Everything everyone said resonated. I guess my mind kind of went to the microscopic and how this is beautifully reflected in nature and what the creator goes through on the macroscopic level. There's infinity, and paradoxically, it goes through the inevitable space of sacrifice of itself in order to funnel itself into infinity. And then on the other side of that is, of course, there's chaos, especially when you look at the very beginnings of any physical creation or solar system. There's a lot of chaos and just a lot of randomness going on. And then eventually over time, there begins to be order and structure and then beauty. So my mind just kind of went to the microscopic level, and how we as a creator in miniature, how our personal kind of deconstructions and transformations reflect that on a smaller scale.
Well, you went microscopic, but also macroscopic. And that's beautiful. You went cosmic, I guess. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, guys, this was a quick hour. Would anybody like to close this down? And next week, we will be doing a Law of One session. So we'll be coming up with a way to talk about that in dialogue. But would anybody like to close this down and close the closing invocation?
I'll do it.
Okay, Matt, thank you.
Lord, Creator, Universe, we come to you and we lift each other up in this time of reflection and self-awareness and awareness of the world around us. I show great gratitude to the space that we're in. Each space that we're in, I think, is a blessing, sometimes in disguise, but it's a gift. And I hope that each of us can see the benevolence in those times when we need it, and that we can recognize the love and the beauty around us with everyone, so that when we can see the bellicosity or the fundamentalism or the hate or whatever it is, we can accept it with open arms as they are, and understanding that we were once in that place as well. Maybe it looked a little different, but still in that place. So be with us as we go out tomorrow and the rest of this week, as we try to push forth the green and blue rays that we can. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys. Great to see you. God bless. We'll see you next week. Love you. Love and hugs.